Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Ben's Tries to Fill 4.5 minutes with talking. I had someone ask in the comments if I would spend a little time talking about my technique and specifically mixing water and pigment with watercolors. And I have to comment right now, because it's still in the drawing phase of this, that I do feel like the more I draw and the more I paint, the more I feel like I'm a painter and not a drawer. Like, my drawings are just not that awesome. In watercolor painting, there's a few things that you have to juggle when it comes to like water and pigment. The first thing that's probably kind of obvious is that normally when you do watercolor painting, you don't use white. And so the way that you get different values is by varying how much water and how much paint you're adding. So to get lighter values, you would add more water and less paint. And to get darker values, you would add more paint and less water. Of course, it's not totally as simple as that, but that's pretty much how it goes. The other thing that you have to consider when you're doing watercolor as related to water is that your paint goes where the water goes. The obvious way that this usually goes is that your paint's going to go from your brush to the paper, because your brush is wetter than the paper normally. But if your paper is wetter than the brush, it can work the other way, where you put your brush down and the paint and the water actually gets lifted onto the brush from the paper. And this usually happens in annoying ways by accident. However, it is a technique that painters use to create lighter areas in paintings. The third way that this works is paper to paper. And usually the way you see that play out is if you're doing a wash and the water is uneven on the safe surface of the paper, the paint will actually migrate from the wetter areas of the painting to the drier areas of the painting, and you'll get uneven coverage, and it actually kind of ends up looking sort of lumpy. And that's kind of how the wash on this painting started. I had to go back in and do some things to get it less lumpy. The other thing that can happen is if your paper is already wet, you'll have sort of this layer of wet paint on top of the painting, and you'll try to go in with a really wet brush, and there you get what we call bloom, which is that as the water evaporates from the paint, it actually heads out towards the edges, towards the drier paper. And so you end up with a light sort of halo inside of a darker ring or darker, areas on the outside of this area of paint. And that's annoying. Lastly, I would say that I've noticed that in the beginning of doing a painting, I use lots of paint. Like, I really load up the brush, generally speaking. And as the painting continues, because the paper is getting more wet, I will use a drier brush as I go along in the painting. And then by the end, I'm practically using some dry brush techniques. So you really have to pay attention to how wet your brush is, and then how much pigment is in there versus water. I like this paint set. It's the one that I got from the MOMA Gift Shop in New York City, which you can buy these online too. The one thing I will say about it is that it is very gouache, in that it's pretty opaque, and there's definitely a sort of chalkiness to the final effect of the paintings. The black can only get just so black because of the chalkiness, but I like it otherwise. And I like how, so far, the pigments that I've used in this paint set haven't been the kind that stain the paper. I like that a lot. I think that's about all I have to say, and I've talked really long now, so I'm gonna go. Thanks for watching and listening, and as always, if you have questions or suggestions for any sort of content that you want to see in these videos, let me know in the comments. Thanks for listening. Bye.